We get to hear from you today, Pastor, on I think one of your more favorite genres of reading, which I've been getting into more and more, and that is biographies. So
Hmm.
it's not going to May's featured resource isn't going to be one specific resource, but more of a primer on a type. So I guess let's start by just asking you the question, what about biographical reading helps us build for a lifetime of healthy and effective ministry?
Yeah, I think reading biographies is a continuation of the model of Jesus. You look at what Jesus did. He came into the earth, eternal God. He brought his eternal biography with him, and then he walked among people, revealing that eternal biography, his eternal nature, but also biography. God is not static. I mean, he's the same, never changing, but he's dynamic in his actions. So he brings his dynamic divinity into humanity and begins to walk with 12 people, of course, others. But of those 12, he reveals that eternal biography. And then in the apostles' doctrine, we then have that story going on, that narrative, if you will, And then we have the gospels being written, but initially recorded in papyri and then copied and on and on and on to this very day. So, if you will, then the eternal biography of Jesus was given to 12 men, and they then took that eternal biography and they taught that in the apostles' doctrine, teaching people then how to walk in the way of Jesus, not becoming gods, of course, but how then the way of Jesus translates really into life, human life in a fallen world. The apostles start dying off, but the people they have taught the biography of Jesus, they keep teaching them, and don't miss this, primarily, well, at least near primarily through books. The history of the church is in books. And when people told their oral stories, their verbal stories, they were always verified by the apostles' doctrine, the papyri, the books, if you will. Into this day, we can go back through the records of all these great people in church history, men and women, and read the biographies, how they have learned the apostles' doctrine, how they've learned the biography of Jesus and tried in their worlds and their times to put them into practice. That's called wisdom, which in our time is greatly under threat. In our current culture, wisdom is almost an anti-value. We like information and knowledge and all these things, and yet through biographies we see how people tried to bring the story of Jesus, his eternal biography as creator and redeemer, into their fallen world, in their personal lives, and we have that today through their biographies. So that's the primary way I think it's important. It's not just their good stories. It's not just that their wisdom of how to live, but they continue to follow the model of Jesus as he taught 12 people to follow him in his life and his way.
One of the things that's surprised me, like I look back through the resources, both in library thing and then the several insight questions that we've had over the last 8 years about, just favorite books, your top shelf books and things like that. And I've always kind of been surprised by the number of either secular fiction works or secular nonfiction biography type things. Like I think at one point somebody mentioned the biography of Ben Franklin. Now you could argue he was a Christian, but at the same time he was a little more of a deist and a liberal than I think we would be today.
Hmm.
Do you see that same kind of value for reading
Absolutely.
biographies in these secular works like this?
Absolutely. In fact, I brought one today. Boris Johnson wrote The Churchill Factor. You really can't understand 20th century without Churchill. Can't understand Western civilization without Churchill. I mean, look at the rise of not just Nazism, but communism at the same time. I mean, how do you, as the leader of the free world at that time, because initially the U.S. had backed out of the World War II, and this guy was the one who decided to stand up against them, not negotiate. So you can't understand Western Civ without him. Now, why is Western Civ important? Well, because Western Civ was founded primarily upon Christian Judeo values. So there's a lot there to learn from them. My first biography, I remember this. This is so strange. Going to the library as a little boy, getting the story of Lou Gehrig. You know, I don't like the Yankees. Okay, fine. But Garrett is my favorite baseball player after Pete Rose. But you read character. He's a man of great character. And there he stands as he's dying with what's called Lou Gehrig's disease today. And he says, I'm the luckiest man in the world as he's dying. Now, you can't read that and ask, how can he say that? Boom. There's value in that. I read the story of Crazy Horse, the great Native American chief, his battle to keep his people free, which he lost, but the integrity of the man, he maintained a greatness. And that brought him true fame. In our day, we're living with celebrity. Someone wears a crazy outfit that gets celebrity. Well, Crazy Horse is willing to die for what he believed in, you know, and through that gained fame. So I think there's a lot of value in reading secular biographies as well because of what they teach us. It may not be Christian per se, but the values are themselves eternal. Yeah.
And one of the other things I've noticed looking through our Journey resource library is that there aren't a lot of biographies.
Mm.
I don't know what that says about our generation, or even if that is a comment on our generation. Do you think that
Oh.
we as millennials are less inclined to listen to the past?
I was told that going at CBC, that you guys didn't want to hear from the past, and I found the exact opposite. Uh, Almost without exception at CBC, I found students wanting to hear my story. Was that because I'm a missionary? I don't know. That probably played into it, but they wanted to hear my story, wanted my input. Journey is proof of that. We've always had a waiting list for Journey. I do think part of it may be that my generation has taught your generation not to value wisdom. As a boy, we read Aesop's Fables in elementary school. I wonder how many millennials read Aesop's Fables. My daughters in France in the third grade are reading French philosophers. They're reading the biographies of the French kings in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, which is an amazing thing because if you're in France, I mean, it's the Fifth Republic, I believe, but we live there, so we know there's a great sense they're living in French history. French history is not in the past, it's living on today. See? And those values of France that make a French people, brings French pride, came through reading not just history, but biographies of history. And that then brings, let's just call it French wisdom, if you will. And I think that you've been taught not to treasure wisdom. And one way to break that is to not let you read biographies, if you will. So I think my generation didn't ask you to read those things. As far as the larger picture, if you have eschewed them or not, I don't know. I've not
Hmm.
thought about that. Yeah.
I don't feel like we have personally, but it's just interesting that there aren't many biographies in the
Yeah.
resources that we're
Yeah.
making note of.
I hadn't caught that. Your insight really intrigues me now. I'm kind of saying, why, what have I not done? I don't know. uh,
Well, I think it's interesting that, and I don't know if this happens to every generation, but you get this sense that something like well, even World War II is distant history,
mhm.
or let alone like the Civil War, the American Revolution. And yet, I was talking to my neighbor across the street just the other day. His mom's living with him. She turns 90 here next month. And I mean, it's very likely that for the first bit of her life, she was around people who were alive during the Civil War.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
I think our grasp of time is is different. I don't know if that's because of technology, the way things advance so quickly, communication is happening so rapidly that even 10 years ago seems distant.
Yeah.
But I think it's easy to be dismissive of those things because they feel so distant.
Two studies have just been released that eighth grade down, the lowest history, civics, and government scores in American history, recorded history.
Mm.
Students in the eighth grade and down is probably true of high school as well, and college. We don't know American history or world history. We don't understand our own government. So most, high school seniors don't know we have three branches of federal government and what they do and why they're there. So we've not taught you these things. So there's not a love of history, if you will. Um, if you don't read it, you can't love it. But when you read it, you feel again participation with it. That's one of the challenges I think we have in the church. Is we're let me step back here. It's in our time I was in Spain with friends and had a guitar, and they pulled it out. I said, let's worship the Lord. So I pulled out the guitar and played. And I sang a song, was like 3 years old. And so that's an old song, play a new song. 3 years old, you know? Hymns, no, those are old things. We want something new. In our time right now, if it's more than a week old, it's gone. It's gone. There's only the present. There's no time like the present. And yet that quote comes from, I think it was 1769.
Mm.
There's no time like the present. And yeah, if you think about the church, God only has one big C church. And we interpret that as the church of today, horizontal. So the church of Nigeria and of China and America, all these are all the same, but it's not only horizontal, it's vertical. We are connected with the church that Jesus began. And to deny relationship with them, I think, is a sin. We need to
Mm.
engage with that church. They have a vote, if you will, in today's church, because they were the ones that Jesus first taught, passed the biography on to. They're the ones who have died as martyrs, etc. So for us to be a whole church, we have to engage horizontally with our time, but not to the neglect of the greater church of history as well. See?
All right. Well, give me three of your top biographies or autobiographies. We'll include those as well here.
That's a killer question.
Ah,
I just
no.
limit someone to three. I'm feeling my own
Would
pain
you
there
rather
too.
me limit you to one? Is it easier to pick one?
Be easier to pick 10, you know.
Listen,
Um,
listen, I word the question the way that I did because I'm after a specific response. Don't
yeah,
qualify it. Just give me.
yeah. That's how I do things. So yeah. All right. I've got my A list and my A minus list. The first one might surprise you. It surprised me when I read it. I bought this for $1. It's The Road to Assisi by Paul Sabatier, the essential biography of Saint Francis. It's a remarkable read. It's almost like reading A Tale of Three Kings in the life of one man. Assisi's story, he was a noble. He was gentry. He was very wealthy and threw it all away to go and serve the poor and literally live hand to mouth. And the story, and you read this, it's a beautifully convicting story. You don't, it's never condemning because they never talk about you, they talk about him. But you again see the biography of Jesus and him. And it speaks to me so powerfully. I love this book. I really, really did. Second one, Martin Luther by Metaxas. Now, I could bring you several on Luther. I read 3 on Luther last year. And this I like Metaxas as a writer. He's an excellent writer. His research is very thorough. He goes to source after source after source, and his writing style is very, very easy to read. This is one I just couldn't put down. And
Yeah.
I'm not
On
a, go ahead.
on that one, I read like halfway through the physical book, but I also listened to it on Audible, and
Mm,
Metaxas is the narrator.
really?
So you get to hear the author read the book, and he's great to listen to as well.
I bet there's a different nuance with that, the passion.
Yeah, yeah, sure. It's fun to hear him speak some of Luther's words.
Mm,
Like oh man, I'm gonna butcher the quote, but it's one of Luther's when Luther said something to the effect of, if God gives us such great things in this the um he literally uses the term shit house.
uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's there. It's
How
there.
great will his gifts be in eternity? And it's
Yeah.
fun to hear Metaxas read that line.
Yeah. Well, we all know that Luther was a very earthy man, right?
He was, which
Uh,
I really appreciate.
yeah, he was very, well, the Germans are very earthy, and that's not a criticism.
Yeah,
Every culture is different how they approach things, and Luther was very German. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was a good one. I have 2 others out there I enjoy very much too. And I'm not a Metaxas fanboy, but if I was to say to someone, read one biography, if I could only pick one, it would be this one.
Mm.
Um, because again, Bonhoeffer's life, such a rich, full life intellectually and spirit, relationally, community. He was the one who was mentored and mentored. He was the guy who would make very difficult decision to go back into Germany, knowing he probably would die, What about this moral dilemma about being involved in the attempted assassination of Hitler? Now, if you read those things and close the book and don't walk away with questions, you're not reading the book. You read that book, I stop right there, I close the book, and I'm thinking, what would I have done? Was that right? Was that wrong? And so, for example, my brother-in-law comes in this year, missionaries out in South Pacific, and we talked about this book that led to the question about Hitler, and we talked about that thing. It really was a thing that engaged my gut, my core, and a good biography does that. It's not just his story, but it's his story and how it speaks to you about you, and that's what really good biographies do. It's their story, but then what it speaks to you about your own self, and I love that one for it. I'm going to cheat and say, also make sure you read Eliot. Anything with in the Eliots, through Gates of Splendor, things like that. I really think one area that pastors don't read is in missions. They really should read in missions. It's ironic to me because when I was traveling 20 years as a missionary, church to church to church, I spoke at hundreds of churches across the country, and I would bet you, I don't think I'm wrong. I bet 90% of the time the pastor specifically said, give us mission stories, give us missionary stories. That's what these books do. They give us great mission stories, the things that really lift our faith and challenge us. So anyway, I'd read some good missions biographies too.
That's good. On that note, just to kind of wrap up here, because I won't make this super long. The relational aspect of the Christian life. I think we take it for granted sometimes. We in Journey understand that a little bit more than I think a lot of people do. The value of these peer-to-peer relationships, the the vertical coach to coachee relationship. But honestly, I've been mentored / coached by John Bunyan, John Owen,
Yeah, that's
C.S.
good.
Lewis.
That's good.
And I haven't physically been present with them in the room. I haven't sat down for one-on-one coaching sessions with them. But relationally, they're nearer to me in time and stuff than even Jesus was. And I feel closer to Jesus, but at the same time, these are my fellow brothers and sisters throughout history. And like you said, we can't say that we're not part of that church.
And there's a beauty in being a part of that church. I'm like, I read Bonhoeffer or whichever one you want to talk about. I come to a place where Bonhoeffer says something, I can pause, I can think about it, and questions start to fly through my mind. I wonder what Bonhoeffer would say to this then. And what about the consequences there? I can then open the book back up and go back into it. So it's not like a conversation, you lose the words. So often in our calls on Journey, one of us will say, boy, I wish we'd recorded today. Today was really a great call. Well, here we have recorded calls, if you will. So we can go back and engage them, if you will. And if I may, a little commercial for actually reading physical books. Came across a study this week, 2016, a Yale study that showed that those who read physical books, open it up and read it, live 2 years longer than those who don't read. Physical book advertisements, physical book PSA, no extra charge, okay?
All righty.
So, yeah, let's be readers of biographies.
So if we're going to go get these biographies, get them physically, unless, of course, you want to join Jesus and be absent from the body sooner.
Hey, get them any way you want to get them. By audio, I don't care. Enjoy them. And someday, write your biographies, all you guys. I think you have a story to tell too. Yeah.
All righty. Thanks, Pastor.
Hey, thank you. I enjoyed it today. Time flew by.
It's good stuff.